Hello. Hello, good evening. Happy almost Rosh Hashanah. We're in the few days that are right before Rosh Hashanah. Today is Wednesday. Erev Rosh Hashanah begins on Friday. And there's an excitement in the air. There's an excitement among everybody who's making preparations, no matter if we are going to be at home. To all my friends that are just tuning in, happy Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to start the class now, and periodically we'll greet people, speak, because there's a lot to learn before Rosh Hashanah. We're only going to be touching on such a small part of it, and I hope we should all have the blessing that it be an inspiration for us and to open up our Rosh Hashanah, that we can really understand how to serve God with joy and how to heal the world and how to really move forward in our lives in a holy way. So I want to dedicate this class tonight to the safety and healing of everybody, just absolutely everybody, that those who need a healing should have a healing, that those who need protection should have protection. I want to dedicate it to all the brave men and women that are protecting Israel at a time where world peace is beginning to emerge. And I want to dedicate this class that we can all join together with tremendous care for each other and care for the planet and know how to choose the good and the holy and send love and healing to everybody that we know. So I want to start off with a story, but before the story, we know our sages teach us that during this time between Rosh Hashanah, which is in 2 days, and Yom Kippur, is a time to increase in charity, in the giving of charity. And I will speak about it again at the end of the class, but it's traditional before Rosh Hashanah to increase in charity, to increase in good deeds, and involvement in mitzvahs, commandments, from the beginning of Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, more than any other time of the year. So I want to start off with a story about charity, about giving charity. So in the Los Angeles community, there are just so many inspiring people to emulate and to really follow their examples, and so many people whose hearts are just wide open to Israel and really want to do the best that we can for Israel. And there is a couple, and they had a store in Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive. And it was a time that there was a great need for ambulances in Israel. And ambulances, I mean, one can only imagine. I don't know how much they are, but they were a lot of money. And these people closed their store for a week and donated it as a fundraiser for the raising of money for Magen David Adom, that the community should buy an ambulance. And different people, and they use their contacts with different beautiful stores and organizations to donate goods, dresses and clothes and hats and shoes and all kinds of accessories that were brand new, that were very beautiful, to sell in order to make money to buy this ambulance. And I have a friend who lives here in Los Angeles, and she was a world famous milliner, and she had a workshop of employees, and she made beautiful hats, and each hat sold for a few $100s. And she donated, I believe, over 60 hats to this fundraiser and other accessories, and they did sell and they did bring in a lot of money. And Baruch Hashem, the community was able to come up with the money, and so many people contributed and worked on it, and they were able to buy this ambulance. And this friend of mine told me that 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after donating all of these hats to this sale, a woman came into her showroom and said that she was moving to Florida and she was thinking of opening a hat store. So she wanted to purchase a large number of hats, which she did. And okay, everybody put on their seatbelts. The total amount that she purchased was within the range of the total of goods that this woman had donated to the fundraiser. So we know from our teachings that God will pay us back. So this time of year, there is so much need. There's so much need. There's so many places to give. The Chai Center every year has an annual appeal for Rosh Hashanah for people that we help, events that we do during the year, and whoever's on our mailing list will be getting an email tomorrow, and otherwise you can always donate it at chaicenter.org. It is particularly important at this time of year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to be overly generous in tzedakah. And I have projects in Israel that I support, and women that all of you have helped me over the years help. So it says tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, the time of return, prayer, and the acts of charity. So it's explained in Chassidus that on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, which will be Friday, as the sun is setting, there is the sphere, the energy emanation of what we call Malchus, the royalty, the sphere that's actually the feminine. It withdraws and returns to the supernal realms, returns to the higher world. And then it says the Jewish people must renew their drawing down of God as king in the world. And when does that happen? It happens in the daytime. It happens during the first day of Rosh Hashanah at the blowing of the shofar. And we're going to study more about the shofar and about what happens when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos. Last week we went over really a lot of teachings on the different levels of Rosh Hashanah, on the Malchios, which is the coronation of God as King, the Zichronos, which are the remembrances, which are the covenant. So this week we're going to focus mostly on the shofar, but I want to just review a little bit before we begin about the shofar. So it says that the fundamental theme of Rosh Hashanah is the coronation of God as King over us. And we know that a coronation is very awesome and very holy, very, very significant. And there's trembling when we say the days of awe. These are called the days of awe, A-W-E. And we say that there's trembling that goes far beyond the level of fear. It says that fear is the lower level and awe is the higher level. And so we're not afraid of punishment. We stand in awe of God during this time. And there is a saying for it, and it's called the awe of God's grandeur. And it says that this is something that we can meditate on. One of the things that I've learned from Rabbi Ginsburg is about meditating. And I just see a note, my eyes are working today, that's a miracle, from Lisa Toffler saying that ambulance that the community fundraised for and created is in Sderot, where Penina Toffler, our beloved Penina, who's in a Mechina program, is. So she should be protected. All our children should be protected. I just want to proudly share that today I got videos of my grandson Ari, who is a paratrooper, jumping out of a plane. I don't know if his mother was as excited to see those pictures as I was, but it was really quite moving and touching. And they all should be protected, and we should all be protected, and it's really a time. So I want to encourage everybody about meditation. You know, I speak about meditation a lot. I do meditate. I feel it really solidifies our teachings into our inner bones, inner marrow. So this is something to meditate on, this awe, this grandeur of God, and to contemplate your personal role in the coronation of God. And it says that Rosh Hashanah renews our personal bond with God and as an individual, and our community and our worldly coronation with God. God is being coronated over the whole world. It's not just over you and me. And what is it when you imagine a coronation and you imagine standing at this majesty that's going on? It does evoke this tremendous awe, this feeling of awe deep inside. So how do we get there? How do we get to this place of like this purity and open-heartedness? So we talk about tshuva, and tshuva is returning, is being yourself on your holiest level, returning to who you are as a holy Jew. And it's the soul's return to its source. Many people will use the word, many people will use the words and say it's repentance, but really it's returning to your source. Before you can turn to your source, you do have to maybe repent and regret over things that might have drawn you away from your source. But tshuva is really the return to the source and a renewed oneness with God, and a renewed oneness inspires us. You know, everybody loves those New Year's resolutions. So God's coronation requires readiness from the person to assume a certain spiritual state so that all our possessions and all our essence really are given over to God. And we're going to go in depth further on and understand what that means. So we know that the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, wrote, Rosh Hashanah is called the head of the year, not the beginning of the year, because there is a level in a person called a head. I have a head. You see my head. You don't see too much else. And the head, it has the intellect, and the head it kind of directs the body. And so there is also a head in time, and that is Rosh Hashanah. So we can explain that there are sparks of holiness that are related to the soul of every Jew. And those sparks are ones which me and you in particular have to refine. They're given to us to refine. And these sparks are clothed in physical things that God gives for a particular spiritual service. And so this is why we ask for physical needs in order to fulfill our portion of reign over the whole world. So we're not requesting things for ourselves. We're requesting it for the sake of God and to serve God. So I want to, before we continue, talk about the Haftorah, and then we'll go into the deeper inner meanings of the shofar. This Haftorah is so beautiful. It's the Haftorah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So the prayer book for Rosh Hashanah contains many prayers which petition God. We ask to be remembered in the book of life. We ask to be inscribed in the book of life, blessing, peace, and prosperity. And we have many personal requests that we ask for on Rosh Hashanah. And many of them have to do with material blessings. So the question is asked, is that what we're doing? Is that proper? We're going to ask for what we want, for material things. So our sages teach us that on Rosh Hashanah, God asks us to proclaim him king over us. Proclaim me king over you. And in the midst, just picture you're in the midst of, Queen Elizabeth's royal coronation. You say, tap her on the shoulder, excuse me, I'd like A, B, C, D, E. Okay. Does that sound correct? But on Rosh Hashanah, we acknowledge God's sovereignty, and then we ask him with prayers for fulfillment of our material desires. And this is despite the view of the Zohar. In the Zohar, it says, a person who makes such requests during the days of awe resembles a parasitic leech crying, give, give. Okay, we'll put that aside for now. However, these petitions are part of the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah. And we have that paradox with prayer in general. So the Rambam teaches us that the mitzvah, the commandment to pray, is what derived from a Torah commandment, and you shall serve God with all your heart. So our sages ask, what is the service of the heart? This is prayer. And prayer is not easy. Prayer is not easy, but it says that even a sigh from the depth of your heart is prayer, that we need to use our own words also to pray. But if we don't have those words, we have prayer books, we have teachings that help us, guide us into different stages of opening our heart for prayer. So prayer, so how can asking for your own personal needs be called service of the heart? So this is a teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Rosh Hashanah, again, we say is the head of the year. And how the head goes is how your whole year goes. So I just want to emphasize at this point that what you do on Rosh Hashanah, which is 2 days that are really called one extended day, is very important for how your year is going to go. In our family, we used to always say, don't verschlafen your mazel, like don't sleep away your blessings for the year. So where many people have the custom, have a nice glass of wine, have a little Shabbos nap. On Rosh Hashanah, we have the custom not to sleep during the day. We have the custom to use our time to be kind and loving to other people, to maybe blow shofar in the neighborhoods, to say the book of Psalms, to learn Torah. We use that time in focus of how we want our year to be. We're giving ourselves like a spiritual shot in the arm of mega doses of vitamin C for the year. Okay, to continue. So the Haftorah talks about the story of Hannah, who was a prophetess. And you can read this, we're very lucky that we have internet in our days, because you can go on many websites. Chabad.org is a great website. I learn a lot of classes. A lot of the teachings that I use in my class are from different rabbis, Rabbi Jacobson and Rabbi Raskin, and from Rebbetzin Yamini, and from just many, many different sources. And there's so much available to us that we can learn from. So if you haven't read yet the whole story of the book of Hannah, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow to do that. So we read that Haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And basically the story is that Hannah was married to Elkanan, and he had another wife also whose name was Penina. And Penina was blessed with many children, and Hannah did not have children. And it caused her much pain in her heart. And every year the family would go on a pilgrimage to Shiloh. Now, Shiloh was where the Mishkan was, and the Mishkan stood in Shiloh for almost, I think, 390 years, something like that. And when you visit Shiloh today, and may the doors of Israel be wide open for us all to come visit and live there, you can go to Shiloh and you can actually see and stand on the site of where the Mishkan was. So when they would travel to Shiloh, one of the things that they would do is each year that they would go, Elkanan would go on a different route, a different route, so that on the way, people would say, where are you going? And he would tell them he's going to serve God and encourage them to come to do the service in the temple. So one year that the pain and the bitterness of longing for a child and not having one just overcame Hannah. And she left the feast that they were having, and she went into the sanctuary, and she opened her heart in deep prayer for a child. And it came to pass that she prayed for a long time, and only her lips moved, but her voice, it says, was not heard. And Eli, the high priest, thought she was drunk. So I want to mention here that it is very important when one prays, first of all, to pray in the language you understand. We learn this from the Baal Shem Tov, that if you can read Hebrew but you don't understand Hebrew, pray in the language you understand. There are certain prayers that you, I'm sure, know the words of in Hebrew, and you can intersperse those. But also, you have to move your lips when you pray. Otherwise, it's called reading. So that you can either say the words very softly or just have your lips moving, but that's what we call prayer. So Ellie saw her lips moving. Now, up to that point, the way people kind of, quote, prayed was by bringing sacrifices, which we will talk about next week before Yom Kippur, bringing sacrifices to the sanctuary. No one had ever used words and stood in supplication with a broken heart and words pouring out, but in silence with the lips moving. And Ellie says to her, how long will you be drunk? Put away your drunkenness. And she says, no, I am a woman of deep sorrow. I have not drunk wine. I have poured out my soul before God. And then Ellie answers her, go in peace, may you be blessed. So we know that Eli was the high priest, and he was the judge of the entire Jewish people, and he had tremendous wisdom and experience. So why did he judge Hannah so harshly instead of trying to understand what was going on? Obviously, he knew she wasn't drunk with wine, because if she was, he would have immediately removed her from the temple. So, and we also know that Torah doesn't dwell on negativity. So why was this era of judgment and him accusing her of being drunk, why was this written down for all posterity? And why was this narrative chosen for Rosh Hashanah? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe is going on to teach that Eli never regarded Hannah as drunk. He perceived her sincerity. However, he accused her of being drunk only figuratively. He couldn't understand how Hannah could stand before God in the holy sanctuary and be intoxicated by her own desires, her own needs. And she says, I am not drunk. I poured out my soul to God. My desire came from the depths of my being. So we know that physical desires are not always motivated by selfishness. I think this is such a huge point to understand, that a person might think that they want a material thing as an end in itself, but the desire might really be rooted in the depth of that person's soul. How do we know this? Because everything in the world contains sparks of godliness, and the godliness is concealed within material nature of the world. And what is our job? We've been given the job of drawing out these holy sparks, refining the material, and revealing the godliness that's inside it. Each person has their own particular godly sparks to elevate. I like to think mine are in India. That's why I visit every year. You know, wherever I want to go, oh yeah, I have my godly sparks there. But they are there. Otherwise, you wouldn't find yourself there. There are things for you to do in the different places that you find yourself. Nothing is by chance. Everything is by the word, by the hand of God. So every individual is destined to elevate certain sparks. And your divine service is necessary for your own spiritual growth. And if you do not elevate the sparks that you are supposed to elevate, then your soul will not be complete. So the Baal Shem Tov says, hungry and thirsty, their soul longs within them. Why are they hungry and thirsty? Because within this food and drink, there's a godly energy. And that godly energy is theirs to use and to release. And we might be unaware of the spiritual motivation that's underlying our desires, and we consider it maybe mundane, not necessary. But there is a deeper force. And that deeper force is driving our soul to want children, possessions, material success, often because we want to fulfill a godly purpose that is associated with material blessings. So it says that Hannah was not motivated by her self-concern, that she wanted to possess a child just for her. She vowed to dedicate her son to God all the days of his life. So this pouring out of her soul to God was an inner deep motivation of her soul. And we know that she did dedicate her son, who was Shmuel the prophet, who is considered one of the greatest, as great as Moshe and Aaron. We have books of prophecy of him. And we do know that Hannah went on to have 3 more sons and 2 more daughters. But this particular son, Shmuel, she had this need, this desire to give him over in the service of God. And then when Eli heard what her desire was, and that it was from the deepest desire of her soul, he blessed her. So it says that on Rosh Hashanah, we focus on the purpose of creation, and the main purpose of us crowning and coronating God in the world is that God desires to have a dwelling place in the world. He desires that this lower world be what we call a dira tachtonim, like his dwelling place in our actual physical world, and in the material. And you know that the way we have beauty, we choose beauty in our homes, and we have guests, and we have Shabbos guests, and we put up mezuzahs, and we have charity boxes, and we have holy books in our home, and we make our physical space holy, and that's how we're elevating the material. And we might have a car, and we might have a beautiful car, and we take people for treatments at the hospital, and we run to do mitzvahs. And so many people, I'm on so many different websites. I'm going to this store. Does anybody need anything? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I mean, the graciousness and the sharing of people's material possessions and what they're using them for is very inspiring. So that when we are asking on Rosh Hashanah, and when we're asking at any time in our prayers for material things, it's not necessarily, it's not for selfish motives, but it's the desire to create a dwelling place for God in this physical world. And then we have another prayer of Hannah's, and she pours out her heart in thanksgiving to God for having fulfilled our request. And this is such an important thing to remember. You know, we ask and we ask and we ask, but we have to thank. We have to be grateful. We have to really show that, you know, like I just began to have in the last few weeks small outdoor Shabbos dinners, with a lot of tables and a lot of people, not a lot of people, a small amount of people, under 10 people, and separated. And I'm so grateful for people, you know. It's such a different way to look after I'm used to having 60 people a week for Shabbos for like the last 35 years or something like that. And then for months I had no one. And I'm so thankful, you know, it's changed my attitude to really to appreciation. And that's what happened with Hannah. She was just thanking God for giving her what she wanted. And so we have to pray, and we have to know that good things will flow in abundance for all of us. And it says that the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. So that's a little bit about Hannah, and now we're going to go on to a little bit about the shofar and l'chaim on water, which is just as good as anything else. So okay, so this year I have some really very interesting teachings. I want to teach something that I learned from my dear teacher Faye Yamini, and then I want to share a teaching from Rabbi Ginsburg, Yitzhak Ginsburg, and then from some other people. But we're talking about Shabbos on Rosh Hashanah. So this year, Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos. The first day is on Shabbos. And it hasn't been this way since 2009. So that's that's a long time ago. And before that, in a 10-year period, I think there were 5 times that Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbos. Now, it's very interesting because we have many people that are attending this class, and some people are very learned and know that the shofar is not blown on Rosh Hashanah, and other people don't know that when it's on Shabbos, and other people don't know that when they will come to a synagogue, if they are going to a synagogue, or an experience of prayer. We are having a new experience that we've never done before. We usually have about 900 people at our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services, and we're having the correct number, 100, socially distanced, outdoors, in an open-air tent. And it will be a very different experience for us. But also that there will be many people that will come and they won't hear a shofar and they'll be so disappointed. So I want to do a teaching on why it's not disappointing not to have the shofar on Shabbos. Some beautiful teachings about what it means Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, and how Shabbos is a receptacle for the voice of the shofar, where we usually blow the shofar in the morning and we draw down that new holy light that's coming into the world to sustain the world and to add a new dimension to the world. Because when we come upon the holidays, each one is new. It's not like we're commemorating, oh, again, it's Rosh Hashanah. Oh, again, it's Passover. No, there's a new light that comes into the world. And with Rosh Hashanah, it's definitely described as a new light. With the other holidays, we know it. But with Rosh Hashanah, it's absolutely described as a new light comes into the world. So it says that we blow the shofar, the mitzvah of the day. What is the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah? Is to hear the shofar. And thank God, all over the country and everywhere, there are going to be shofar blowings on Sunday in so many different places, even though synagogues are not going to be open, because really, in order to receive the blessing of the blowing of the shofar, it's necessary to hear it, not over something, but to actually hear it. And I know that all over different neighborhoods, we sent out an email with many choices of a few choices in different parts of the city of where you could hear the shofar. You can go on Chabad.org. You can look up any synagogue and ask them. I know my friends in the Old City of Jerusalem, my friend Ellen sent me about 20 places in like a 3-block area where there are going to be all kinds of different shofar blowings at different times. So please try to avail yourself of somewhere that they are blowing the shofar. I know that I have a son that lives in Boston, and they have an app for where you live, where they'll bring a shofar nearby that they can blow, either on a street corner or in some communities that have a lot of people that blow shofar, they will even come to your house and blow the shofar for you. So take that as an opportunity. So the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says, before me, make me king. How do you make me king? With the shofar. And it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment. It's one of the main things of Rosh Hashanah, to make God our king by the blowing of the shofar. And it says that in coronations, there were these horns, there were these trumpets. You can just visualize, let's say, a non-Jewish coronation where, you see everybody in their costume and blowing the trumpets. But we declare kingdom through the blowing of the shofar, and Shabbos creates the coronation. Shabbos is going to do that for us. Shabbos is going to be the vessel that will hold those blessings. So what do we know about Shabbos? We know Shabbos is a holy day. We make kiddush over the wine, the blessing over the wine. We sanctify the candles. And everybody, in our email, I sent out the candlelighting blessings and the times. You can also look on candlelighting.org. It's actually an app where you can look up the time in whatever city you live in. The candles this year, since it's Shabbos, need to be lit before sundown on Friday night. There are 2 blessings. The first blessing is Lahad Lekner Shel Shabbos and Yom Tov, or Yom HaZikaron, and then the Shekianu. And on the second night, on Saturday night, you have to make sure not to light the candles before nightfall, because it's not yet the second day of Rosh Hashanah till nightfall from a pre-existing flame. And that has 2 blessings. Also, we just eliminate the blessing of Shabbos. And it's all on the apps, and I sent out an email today. And if you're not on my email list, it's chaicenter.org. You can always go on we'll add you to the email list, and you can get all our, we can bother you many times a week. Okay, So Shabbos is a sanctified time. It's a holy moment, and it's a day of pleasure when our physical existence has been elevated, and there's divine spiritual pleasure that comes through Shabbos. And I have to say that I'm going to share a personal experience. Really, I grew up not having Shabbos. I mean, I went to Sunday school for 12 years. And, we would go sometimes on Friday nights to synagogue. And my grandmother used to light candles with a napkin on her head. And I'm sure many people had their grandmothers light candles with a napkin on. I never understood what the napkin was. Now I know it's a head covering. But until then, I thought, wow, what an odd custom to put a napkin on your head. And so that was my experience with Shabbos. And then I did many other things besides Jewish practice, and I lived in many other countries, which many of you know about. It's not for now. And then I came to Jerusalem, and in Israel at the time, I was in Israel in the 70s. After I was there in the 60s, and I was living on a Moshav Shitufi, which is like a kibbutz, and then I went to a yeshiva in Yerushalayim in the Old City, where I lived there for 4.5 years. And I lit Shabbos candles, and I kind of observed Shabbos because it was very hard not to when you lived in Israel at that time. But I never really felt that what we're talking about here, that inner deep pleasure, that inner spiritual connection of what Shabbos can give to your life, and how that spiritual pleasure can actually feed your soul. And I remember I used to travel a lot, even when I lived in Israel, and I used to like to make myself crazy, making reservations, canceling. So it came to be a Friday. I had been lighting candles maybe for 1.5 years. And, I was in the swing of things. I was in a yeshiva. I went along with the crowd. I mean, I loved it, but I didn't really feel that personal deep connection, that it was part of my soul, part of the bone marrow of my life. And I remember I was trying to decide which trip I was going on and making myself crazy again. And I went, and then I realized after being in the travel agency, I needed to go home and light Shabbos candles. Shabbos was coming, the stores were closing. And for the first time after 1.5 years of lighting candles, I just felt this deep peace, this Shabbos spirituality, the Shabbos pleasure. I don't know what to call it, come over me. And all those questions and the running around in your head and the not being settled and not being in the moment and not being in the holiness all left me. And the minute Shabbos was over, they all came rushing back. And it was really the first time I understood that island of peace and sanctity. So I would encourage everybody, Shabbos is Rosh Hashanah, and there's something very special for our whole entire year that Rosh Hashanah is this year on Shabbos. So I want to encourage everybody to take advantage of it, to get into it more, to learn about it more, and to make it more of your own personal life, and that it should be special for you. It should bring you a lot of joy. So it says, one of the important things of the coronation, it says, say before me the Pesukim, the sentences of kingship. And it says, what if we don't make God king? What is he king over? He can't be king over nothing. So he has to be king over something. So this is what we are celebrating. We're coronating God. In Psalm 93, it says, Hashem is king and he wears his royal garments. So it says, come, let us bow and prostrate and bless before God who created us. That's called an arousal from above. So we say Ani Dodi V'la Dodi Li during the month of Elul. And Ani L'Dodi is an arousal from below. We're opening ourselves up. We're drawing ourselves up to godliness. And we're alive because God values us. He finds us worthy to be his subjects. So the shofar is part of our spiritual work, to hear the shofar. And not blowing the shofar on Shabbos is hard. It's a work. There's also something in it. So we say that the shofar brings us to a state of, in Hebrew it's called bitul, but in English is self-nullification, meaning we're stepping out of the way, really. We're moving ourselves out of out of the way. And so how do you coronate God a king? By giving yourself over to that king. It's not like a boss, it's a king, it's majesty, it's royalty. And this shofar is on this level. It's teaching us how to have this level of self-nullification, just like Shabbos does. And it says the rest of the week, a person does business, they do whatever they, what they need to. But on Shabbos, there's rest. It's not a sleeping rest, even though, as I said before, having a little l'chaim and then having a nap on Shabbos is always a lot of fun, but not on Rosh Hashanah. We try not to do that on Rosh Hashanah. But on Shabbos, we say good Shabbos, we have beautiful things, we save special foods for Shabbos. So this idea of self-nullification, of moving out of the way of Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos is a very high level. Even though the shofar is the means of drawing down, Shabbos is also the means of drawing down the blessings of shofar. And the whole day we're elevated. This year it's going to be a different year. We're all having different experiences this year. Some of us are going to some small outdoor minions gatherings for prayer. Some people are praying at home. I encourage anybody who's praying at home. There is so much available that is free on the internet. If you go to Chabad.org, you could actually download a whole Machzor. Machzor is the prayer book for Rosh Hashanah. And then there's one for Yom Kippur. You can download teachings, readings. It's best to do all of that before Shabbos so you have it available and you won't need to do that on Shabbos. So we align ourselves with the sanctity and the holiness of Shabbos. And it says that, and we have special Shabbos food. The food, when you have leftover gefilte fish, it does not taste the same on Monday as it did when you ate it on Shabbos. And there is a sweet story about a king who was traveling through a town, and he stopped at one of his subjects' homes, and it was Shabbos, and they served him, and he ate all this absolutely delicious food. Maybe it was the cholent that he loved. And when he got back to his palace, he said to his head chef, I want that dish that I had in that village. Please find out and make it for me. So the chef went back to the village, and he went to the family, and they gave him the recipe, and then he went back to the palace, and he made this dish for the king. And the king was so outraged at the dish, tasted horrible. It tasted nothing like he tasted in the house, and he was convinced that the people didn't give him the right recipe. And he sent his servants to bring them to the palace. How dare they treat the king this way? And they said, no. He said, I know you left out an ingredient. There's something that's different. It wasn't there. And they said, yes, the ingredient that we left out was Shabbos. That on Shabbos, things are different. They taste different. You enjoy them in a different way. Shabbos is holy. It's on this level of sanctity and holiness. And it goes on to say that Rosh Hashanah is in the first week of the creation. It's about the creation of man and creation of Adam. And it says that Adam was created, and through his existence, he came to bring all the creatures, the animals and the creatures, to bow down and worship God. And there is a beautiful letter that was a Rosh Hashanah letter that was sent out in 1959 from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I'm going to try to summarize it. And he's talking about that when Rosh Hashanah comes, it's a call for self-evaluation in the year about to end, and resolutions for the year that's coming and going forward. And he said that we have to be very honest, and we have to see what the missed opportunities are, where we want to go further. We talked about last week and the week before, we talked about the 12 days from Chai Elul till Rosh Hashanah are 12 days where we have the ability to go back and examine each month of the year. happened in each month of the year, and to do tshuva, to see where we appreciate what we did do, and where we wanted to do more, and what was missing in those times. So today, which is Wednesday, would be the month of Tammuz. Tomorrow would be the month of Av, and then Friday would be the month of Elul. And when I was thinking about it today, I was thinking about Tammuz, and the only thing that popped into my mind about Tammuz was being in Israel during the being bombed on the 17th of Tammuz while I was cooking to end the fast in Sfat, and the beauty of the unity of the whole country in caring for each other and taking each other in. It's like the whole north. We left Sfat and we went to Hebron, which is a place that we love and that we feel safe. I mean, for some people that might sound odd, but the whole north emptied out because the north was being attacked, and people took families into their homes. There were advertisements in the newspapers. We can take 5 people. We can take a family of 10 people. We can take, a family with 2 dogs, with these animals. I mean, the Ahavas Israel and the openness and the kindness. And when I was thinking about tshuva for the month of Tammuz, somehow that memory today popped into my mind of the destruction that was happening to Israel, but that we all stood together with one heart and one soul, and it was absolutely really very beautiful. And so, where were we lacking in those times? And we have to look at each month, but it's not about only where we're lacking in doing tshuva. It's also appreciating that we also have to show appreciation for those months also. So tomorrow is the month of Av, tonight and tomorrow. And then Friday is the month of Elul, where we can look back and we can say how we wanted to improve with those months that are going on. So Adam was created, and we'll go into a little bit. And it says that man was given the power to conquer the whole world. He was told to have dominion over the fish and the fowl and the living things on the earth. And what does it mean to conquer the world? So it says when God created Adam, his soul was the divine image that permeated his whole being, and he was to be master over a certain way of creation, and he taught all the creatures to bow down and to worship God. Come, let us serve God. And the world conquest was given to man as a mission to elevate, as we said before, to refine and elevate the whole of nature, the sparks, and in the service of humanity, and in the service of our souls, which are literally part of God above, until the whole creation will realize that God is king. Even it says that when in the future time of the redemption, that even the rocks, even the ground and the rock that you walk on will recognize godliness and will say, did you recite words of holiness when you were walking over me? So it says but first the person has to conquer themselves. Before you can conquer the world, you need to conquer yourself. And that is how we live our life every day. And this is why one man, Adam, was created first as a single person, to say that one person has the potential to conquer a whole world. First yourself and then the world. And if you don't fulfill your personal task, then it will affect the whole entire world. If you don't fulfill the mission that you were put here for and why you were born, the whole world will suffer. The whole world, it's not about sitting on that lovely mountaintop and, meditating on God. It's what you're doing here in the physical world. And these are days of introspection for us, and we have to reflect on what God the King wants us to do with our lives and the Torah. And we have to ask ourselves, what have we accomplished, what we have not accomplished, and we have to make resolutions for the coming year. And it says we're all capable of doing that. So this has been given over into our hand to accomplish. So to continue, that our relationship with God is one of subject to king. There are many different levels of our relationship, but it says we don't shrink Rosh Hashanah and make it so small that it's about only who shall live and who shall die. That's not what it is. It's about coronating God king, to be king over the whole world, to be the source of all creation. And so it's also called the Day of Judgment. Do you recognize God as king? Are you prepared? So just like, would you come to your wedding off the street and just, okay, let's get married? No, we have to prepare. And one way we can prepare, and I really want to encourage everybody, is to look at the prayer book before Rosh Hashanah comes. Open the computer, take out your prayer book from your bookshelf, wherever it is, and read through the prayers. I often, in the years that I did not do it, when I would come to Rosh Hashanah and I'd open the prayer book, and all of a sudden I would see these prayers that were familiar but I hadn't seen in a year, and I'm thinking, why didn't I spend time looking at them before? Why didn't I read them before? So preparation, just like you wouldn't, people put a lot of days, hours, and times into preparing for their weddings. What color dress, who's coming, who's not coming. Look at the prayers, read them over, see which one speaks to you, where you want to meditate, what you want to meditate on. This is very, very important. That preparation is really, really huge. Coming to classes like this class, of course, is very important. But to hold that prayer book in your hand and see the prayers that you're going to say, I think it will make a change in your Rosh Hashanah. Okay, let's continue. And yes, there is a difference between Rosh Hashanah and the whole year. And we have to recognize our purpose. We have to recognize the things that actually matter, and that our physical existence is to serve God. And this is the kingdom of God. Are we davening for good health so we can serve our purpose, or just because we don't want to be sick? Are we davening, for material things because we want to serve God with them, or we want our life easier? So we have to be honest. This whole thing is about being internally honest with ourselves. And we talked a lot about last week we talked really the whole time about what does it mean to make God king. So if we feel our purpose, we can validate our spiritual work, and really also to spend time meditating. I can't encourage people enough to really meditate on some of these concepts. Because when we are hungry for something, we can fulfill it. For years, many people filled that spiritual hunger with things that were inappropriate. They didn't even know they had a spiritual hunger. That's how covered over some of our souls have become. From, the story that I shared last week, the Baal Shem Tov story about the king has a child, and he gives him the highest education and all these great tools in life, and then sends him to foreign lands to learn things. And in these foreign lands, the king's child squanders all her money and possessions, and is left in tattered clothes, and barely makes the way back after many years to the palace, and doesn't even know the language anymore, and stands at the gates saying, I'm, the child of the king, and no one even understands what this child is saying, and then starts to cry deeply, and the king recognizes this deep cry as his child. And, it's like sometimes we don't even know what we're crying for. We don't even know what that longing of the soul is. Our inheritance has been taken away from us, really. That's really it. We somehow have been robbed of our inheritance somewhere along the way. So I want to share a teaching of Rabbi Ginsburg. I'm going to try to simplify it. So if you have a Kabbalah seatbelt, please put it on. I'm going to try to synthesize it in the best way that I can. Rabbi Ginsburg is a teacher who lives in Kfar Chabad. I've been studying with him since 1974. And his teachings are on inner.org. And if anybody would like to hear the whole of this teaching that I'm giving over now, if you go on inner.org, it will be under the day Chai Elul. He spoke, it's about a 24-minute talk in English, and he spoke this on the day of Chai Elul. It's about Rosh Hashanah. So if anybody is really interested in going into the depth of it, which I would encourage if you like Kabbalah and Gematria and really deep connections, I would encourage you. But I'm going to summarize it. So in Rosh Hashanah, there's the special, again, a lot of this I'm repeating. I like hearing it for myself over and over, so I hope you like it too. The blast of the shofar ushers in a new and sweet year, a year of hopefully the coming of Mashiach, of the redemption, of deep significance, and we have to contemplate what the significance of the shofar is. And when Rabbi Ginsburg talks about contemplate, when he teaches, he says, meditate on these teachings. So what does it mean, meditate on these teachings? Like, don't just keep them in your head as an intellectual thought, but try to bring them from the head down to the heart, and then from the heart back through the being. That we contemplate, what is it to prepare? What is the significance of the shofar? What memories does it touch in us? Where will it speak to us? So the blessing we say before the blowing of the shofar is, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to hear the voice of the shofar. So the phrase is Lishmoa Kol Shofar. So the initial letters to hear the voice of the shofar, the Shin and the Kuf and the Lamed of Lishmoa Kol Shofar, spell the word shekel. It's the same letters. If you don't know Hebrew, you have to trust me on it. If you know Hebrew, okay. So what is a shekel? The shekel is a measurement. It's a coin of currency, and also something that you weigh. So two objects can be of equal value, of equal weight. If they're an even number, it can be divided evenly. So that's why Rosh Hashanah is also called the Day of Judgment, and there are judges in a court. So judges in a court are always an odd number. They're never an even number. A Beis Din cannot be equal because you might never get anywhere. Okay, so the word shekel has a value, a gematria, a numerical value of 430, which we're just going to put aside the numbers for now, and you're just going to have to trust me on what I'm going to teach now. And Rabbi Ginsburg talks about 4 archetypal types of Jewish souls. Each of the phrases equal the same as the word shekel, meaning they each add up to 430, and they each have an equal value, okay, an equal value. So the first is the general soul, the nefesh klalit, the tzaddik, the righteous person that holds up the world, the foundation of the generation of the world. So a nefesh klalit is a general soul that has all the souls within it. A great Rebbe, Moses, has that, the tzaddik, the righteous person of the generation, and that relates to the highest world, which is the world of Atzilus. The next level of person is the Torah scholar, one who is fluent in all the Torah teachings. That person deals in the word, the mind, and the intellect. This is the scholar, and that world is the world of Bria. The next is the happy chassid, comes after the Torah scholar. So chassidim have to be happy, according to the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. What does that mean? You have to serve God with joy. That's the world of emotions, and that's the level of world that's Yetzirah. And then there is the lowest world, which is the world of Asiya, and that the Baal Shem Tov calls the simple Jew, the one that the Baal Shem Tov loved. There's no special advantage over another, and that's the world of action. And the Baal Shem Tov says that all of these souls, because they all have the same gematria, these phrases, all are equal, meaning the simple Jew and he are the same, that no one has more advantage one over the other. They all equal 1 shekel, so to speak. They all equal the same, and therefore there is that equalness to it. Okay, to move on. So this now it says that that's the common denominator. This initial level is the common denominator of all the souls of Israel. So this year, on Rosh Hashanah, we know, again, we've said this before, the day is Shabbos, so there's no blowing of the shofar. And how do we, but there is on Sunday. How do we hold the secrets? This is so beautiful. How do we hold the secrets and blessings of the shofar that come down to us when the shofar is blown? Where are we going to hold that if we don't have the shofar to bring those secrets of the teachings of the deepest level and the blessings? How do we hold that if we have no way to draw it down with the sounding of the shofar? And it says that it's through Shabbos. We are taught in Chassidus that the proper observance of Shabbos, especially the holy pleasure that a Jew has in Shabbos, is called Oneg Shabbos. It is called the pleasure of Shabbos. So we do everything for Shabbos for the sacred honor of the Shabbos, which is the queen. So we say, L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh. You go to the store and you buy a beautiful fruit and you say, L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh. You put on beautiful clothes. You say, L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh, for the honor of the Holy Sabbath. And this brings down that pleasure we take in that honoring of Shabbos. The pleasure, just pleasure, pure pleasure, brings down the same blessings and the sustenance that the voice of the shofar brings down when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. It just was so beautiful. It's so beautiful to understand that, to celebrate Shabbos in that such a beautiful way. And there is a custom that we do say we have our finest clothes. If you buy something new, it's the custom to save it for Shabbos, L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh, to find the beautiful foods, etc., etc. And we say everything is in the honor of the Holy Shabbos. So the phrase L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh is 3 words. There's a lamed, there's a kuf, and there's a shin. And the phrase Lishmoa Kol Shofar is also 3 words. It's a lamed, it's a kuf, and it's a shin. So here we see that L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh, for the honor of the Holy Shabbos, and Lishmoa Kol Shofar, to hear the voice of the shofar, are the same initial letters. And what do those words spell? They all spell shekel. So it's like the bone, you're sucking the bone marrow of these teachings. It's like the equivalency. So we know, we're given that the honor and the pleasure of celebrating Shabbos is the vessel and vehicle to bring down it's the substitute really for the shofar. It brings down the same blessings and the sustenance and as the shofar does, and it serves the same purpose and objective when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos. And it like, for me, it like just, it takes away that, oh no shofar. It just gives that beautiful uplift to your spirit. And then the teaching goes on and it becomes much, much more Kabbalistic. And I won't go into it now, but if anybody is interested, I would be happy at a future time to take it apart piece by piece and learn it, because it's just like mind-blowing. Okay, so to get back to some other things, but if you want to hear it, it's on inner.org. You can email me and I'll help you find it, okay? So God says, I want you to recite before me, again, Malchios, the coronation, the Zichronos, the remembrances, and the shofros. So we say all this in the Musaf. The Musaf is the prayer that we repeat, that all of these are in, that we blow the shofar in. We blow the shofar before we say the Musaf service. And we want to see God's kingship in the world. Show me where I am king in your life. That's what God's asking. Show me. Are you following the mitzvahs? Are you doing it in the most beautiful way that you know how? And the Zikronos is, I want to recite memories. Your memories will be elevated before me for the good. And how will you make me king? That's a good question. So the Gemara says that the shofar reminds us of the binding of Isaac. So we know the story of Isaac, that Isaac was the son of Abraham, and he heard God command that he should sacrifice Isaac, and he went ahead and he did it. And he went to sacrifice Isaac, and instead an angel stopped him, and he took a ram instead. That's a simplified version of the story, okay? But what is it talking about, the binding of Isaac? It says, I consider when you crown me king, and you remember, you recite these memories, I consider it as if you have bound yourself before me. Because on Mount Sinai, we received the Torah, and the sound of the shofar, it says with the blast of the shofar, was very strong. That was the ingathering. And what is the common denominator? That you've revealed yourself on Mount Sinai. You made your voice known. This is the voice of the shofar, the voice of God. You revealed yourself in pure clouds. The world trembled, and when the king revealed himself on Mount Sinai, it was with the sound of the shofar. So the shofar was the vehicle of revelation in the giving of the Torah, and that we're going to hear the shofar again. And this concept that Hashem, that God is real in the world and manifests in the world, and if God is real, then I have a mission. And we have to know what our mission is. It says that a person, there's a song, I think I sang it last week, so I'm not going to sing it again. That you can be born and live your whole entire life just to do one favor for another person. So the sound of the shofar reveals God, and it represents the gathering. And now for some reason I wrote upside down. I don't know why. So it says, what do we blow? We blow from our neshama. We blow from the depths of our soul. And it's like when we blow the shofar, it is like we're entering the Holy of Holies that was in the temple. What was the Holy of Holies? It says that is where the high priest went once a year on Yom Kippur and did the service, which we will be studying about next week in class, did this service for the people and for the new year to be completed, for the people to be sealed, and our turning to God and our coronation accepted. So, I mean, we're standing in the Holy of Holies. We have the opportunity in our lives to stand in that way, to be kind and to be loving, and to go for unity and to go for what unites people is really, to always look for the good is a uniting factor, and that is what's being asked of us. So in the Musaf service, there are 3 sets of verses from the book of Psalms that God ascends with the truah, with the blowing of the shofar, and we praise God with the sounds of the shofar, and that when we hear the shofar, it is our willingness to give everything we have to God. So, it's not a social activity. It's not, it's like a personal moment. It's like we don't want to lose the opportunity. We have an opportunity through Shabbos, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and through the blowing of the shofar on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. It's called Reishi Shana, that it's the head and of the year, but Shana is related to Shinui, which means change. That we have an opportunity especially, in whatever is going on in the world. We have an opportunity and we need to grab it now. We don't want to miss that opportunity. We don't want to say one day, oh, I wish I had paid attention. Oh, I wish that I had made that shofar mean something for me. We don't want to have those type of regrets in our life. So the blowing of the shofar represents this total level of Mesirut Nefesh, of self-sacrifice. That was what the binding of Isaac was. It was the willingness to give everything to God at that moment. So we bind ourselves up. So Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa taught us that nothing in the ram that Avraham sacrificed in place of Isaac, nothing went, everything was used. So the veins of the ram were put into the 10 strings of the harp of David. The hide of the ram were the clothing that was worn by Eliyahu. And the horns of the ram, it says the left horn was blown on Har Sinai, and the right one will be in the future. It will be the big shofar. That every part of the ram was used in the revelation of God in the world, and showing that we are totally devoted to God. Our whole soul will praise God. So the first shofar was the complete passion of Avraham, who is willing to give everything. And we have that capacity. We have this willingness to give everything. How? If we live our life with passion, and we all have the ability to do that. And we all believe that 100%, we don't all believe 100%. When a Jew internalizes these teachings, we do have the capacity to change. We can have 100% clarity that Hashem is in my life. And the revelation of God in my life and in the life of the nation, where do I see God in my life? Everything is a part of godliness, and if I just heard an amazing, I can tell you a million stories. I'm going to hold off on my millions of stories, but just to see all, I'm just trying to find which way I turned all my pages. Just to see all these examples of divine providence in the world is just extraordinary. We see the hand of God in the world, and everybody has that. That's why people love stories, because these stories really reflect the hand of God, and they really happen to everybody. You just have to look around, and you have to see those connections for you in your life. So there's a Rabbi Raskin that studied a class with him that taught different levels of the shofar. So it said, go again, we blow the shofar, and we are commanded to listen to the sound of the shofar. And we have to listen, what is the message of the shofar? There's so many levels you can start to hear things about the shofar on and to learn on. So the Rambam the Rambam wrote many, many books, and one is about the laws of tshuva, return. And he says that there's a hint. And the reason of blowing the shofar, there's so many reasons, but one is those who are in a state of slumber should awake from their sleep and return in tshuva. And there's a part of us that even might show up, but might be asleep. And maybe that sound, if we listen deep enough and hard enough and hear those secret messages that are being sent to us, that we can return in tshuva. And it reminds us to return to God, that if we listen to that shofar, that's what it's saying to us. Accept the mitzvahs, return to God, do the will of God. And a question is asked, why does the Rambam talk about this mitzvah in the laws of tshuva? Why doesn't he mention this mitzvah in the laws of shofar? So the Gemara says, on the day of Rosh Hashanah, it says, say before me words of kingship, so you will accept my kingship upon you and my rule upon you. And we blow the shofar again to coronate God, King of the universe. And at a coronation, you blow trumpets, you blow a shofar. So is it tshuva? Is it a mitzvah? Or is it the coronation? So there are different levels that we look at this at. Level 1 is the mitzvah of shofar. It says it reminds us to resolve and to accept the mitzvahs. It is a mitzvah to hear the blowing of the shofar, and it reminds us to accept upon ourselves the mitzvahs that we are going to follow. And it says that every year, either we should try to accept a new mitzvah, or take a mitzvah that we're doing and do it in a deeper way, do it in a better way, do it in a more conscious way. It's not like we're collecting mitzvahs. It needs to be that we pay attention to what we're doing. I always use the example of Shabbos candles, because for many of us, no matter if Shabbos comes early in the winter or late in the summer, some of us are always late. We're always like rushing to light the candles before the candle lighting time, which is 18 minutes before sundown. So do we take the time? I mean, the thing I'm always trying to work on is remembering what the mitzvah of lighting candles are. That's my commitment to renewal in a year of renewing a mitzvah. Do I stand in front of the candles with awe for the Shabbos coming in and a consciousness that I am ushering in the holiness and the Shabbos in the world by lighting candles? Or am I rushing and, whatever? It's like in the mitzvahs that we're doing, we can renew them. It doesn't mean that we have to find a new obscure mitzvah to take on. That's something we haven't done before, although we want to gather all those mitzvahs and to refine our souls with them. But we also want to do the ones that we're doing with a higher level of awareness and consciousness. So that's one level. Then we know about tshuva. It says tshuva is higher than a mitzvah. Why? Because tshuva can forgive for violating a mitzvah. So like if a mitzvah is violated or gone against, or many mitzvahs, a person doing tshuva can actually elevate those mitzvahs, those averas that they might have done, that going away from godliness, they could elevate it to become merits. And tshuva is not confined to one mitzvah. It has the ability to forgive for multiple mitzvahs. Then there's another higher level, and the third higher level is coronating God as King, with this quality that we spoke of before of bitul, of nullification, self-nullification, moving ourselves out of the way, surrendering oneself to God, surrendering our will to God's will, our desires to God's desires. So it says God takes our soul and he's embracing it, and he's asking us to crown him king. So the soul cries, we talked before about a soul that's so distant, that doesn't know, I'm always so impressed. I really, in all the years that we've been doing services, for people that come once a year, really once a year, and they come with such enthusiasm, and they wear their beautiful clothes, and they're eager, and they're waiting, and they want to make this connection, and they don't even, and that cry of the shofar pierces their hearts, and for that moment they're connected on the highest of levels, because every Jew wants to come back home. Ultimately, really, every Jew wants to come back home. And we ask God, all of us, to take us back home, and that's where we're going to go. So the Tzemach Tzedek, who is the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I think his birthday is this Friday, says the blowing of the shofar represents the awakening of divine pleasure on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. So that connects to the pleasure of Shabbos, that the pleasure of Shabbos is now, the Oneg Shabbos is the vessel for containing the voice of the shofar this year. And God leaves this world on Erev Shabbos, but he's like sleeping. When you're sleeping, your soul, you're there, but your soul is asleep. So there's a level where he ascends on Erev Shabbos and then comes back with the blowing of the shofar with a new light in the world when the shofar is blown during the daytime. And we feel this tremendous pleasure of God with this new light. So I studied this teaching. I want to go over, there's 11 different things about the shofar, and then I want to do a teaching that I learned from a woman, Yehuda Golevsky, I don't know how to say her name, but she teaches at this marvelous school called Shaviti out of Jerusalem, and all their classes are online. And I really had the privilege, when I was visiting my daughter Hindler a few years ago, my dear friend Dina Solomon was meeting me for lunch, and she said, but I go to a class first, and I'll meet you after. And I said, no, I'll meet you at the class. And I walked into this class with this woman, Yehudis, and I think every day that week I walked into a class. It was just so awe-inspiring. So I've been listening to some of her teachings, and if anybody is interested, I can give you their contact number. It's called Shaviti. There's about 5 classes a day by incredible women teachers. And I suggest one of the things to do this year is don't leave me. I always tell my classes when I go away for the summer, but now I never have to go away again. I can always teach. But it used to be I used to go away for many months, and they'd say, oh, don't go away. And then I'd say, well, this person teaches and this person teaches. I said, but you have to sign a contract that you'll come back. But it's always good to learn with new people and to increase in your learning. So there are 11 different things about the shofar. I'll just review them, and then I want to talk about the teaching from Yehudis. So it says it's the shofar blast is the return of the king with the trumpets. It's like an alarm clock. It's like, wake up. It ushers in the first of the 10 days of Tshuva. It says the 10 days of Tshuva are including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we'll talk about that next week. The shofar was blown on Mount Sinai. It's a reminder to return to Torah. It's the voice of the prophets. It represents the voice of the prophets. Sobs, it's tears over the destruction of the temple. It represents the binding of Isaac. It fills us with awe. It signifies the day of judgment, of introspection. It's the day of the return of the nation. It reminds us of the unity of God, and it's the cry of the soul longing to return to God. So the power of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is that the nature of the blowing of the shofar in both the upper worlds and the lower worlds strengthens the good in the world and subdues the evil. Beautiful. So the holy sounds that reverberate inside us. So 2 things. It strengthens the good and it subdues the evil within us and also within the world. So it says that the sounds that reverberate inside us do something to us. This is what we learned from the sages, just like a thunderous sound. So when a child hears thunder, or when we hear, maybe some of us are still scared. We don't get to hear thunder in California. That's one thing that's missing. But thunderous sounds, it has that power to straighten out the twisted pathways in our heart. So beautiful. That it says that the twisted pathways in our heart lead us in a convoluted way, so our heart doesn't flow properly. Our heart doesn't flow properly in the way it should, with love and unity and kindness and all of these things. So when we hear, like a child that hears the thunder and might be scared, it's a wake-up call. The shofar is a wake-up call. And what does it do for us? It strengthens the good that is within us, and it also strengthens the good that's in the world, and it subdues the evil. So if a person hears, this is also, her teaching was from the Ramchal and the Rambam. So if a person hears the sound of the shofar, it can straighten out the convoluted places in the heart. It's like a jolt, like an electric jolt to reconnect with the essence of the good. And when you wake up, what happens? You realize that good is a reality and bad is an illusion. So when the shofar blows, you can imagine the pure heart being cleansed of its twisted places in service of God with ourselves and other people. So I want to say that again. When the shofar blows, you can imagine this pure heart, our pure heart, being cleansed of its twisted places, in our heart being cleared in the service of God with ourselves and other people. It says God is like a light that comes into our heart. And it says that Yehudis, she said, it's like a statin for the heart. I love that. That it's a dose of medicine that melts away all obstructions. Isn't that beautiful? So it says that with the sin of Adam, good and evil became intertwined. And today in the world, the bad has the upper hand. We see that, and we're fighting against it. And we, like, if you ever watch any news reports, they don't tell you about the good. They tell you about the bad. We want to see the good news. So you have to seek it out. And there's a lot of coverings and there's a lot of obstacles. So it goes on to say that my spiritual self wakes up, and hearing the shofar puts this high level of awe into the body, just like thunder. And what is the blessing that we say on thunder? We talk about God's power and his might fills all the universe. So the day of Rosh Hashanah is a day of hope, a day that we put our hearts and our minds in the perfection of the world. So I just want to end with a beautiful story. Oh, no, I don't want to end with a beautiful story. I have one more thing to say. And then I'm going to end with a beautiful story. My dear friend Rachel Trugman, yes, she said thunder and lightning cause fires. Yeah, we don't know the purpose of things. We just don't understand. But for us, those sounds to cause a fire in our heart. I remember a teaching from many years ago where it said that every Jew has access to their holy soul. And even if you've never heard, sometimes somebody will hear something and they'll start to shiver, or they'll say, oh my God, I never thought of that. Because it says that within each Jewish heart, there's like a coal. And what do we know about coals? That they don't entirely go out. They're like smoldering. And what do you have to do to get them to catch on fire? You have to either have thunder or lightning, wave a lot of wind over them, and they'll catch on fire. And that fire is like that passion that we were talking about. That passion, find your path, find your passion in how to serve God. So Rabbi Raskin was teaching another level of the shofar, and it says that when Mashiach comes, God will blow this great shofar. The right horn of the ram will be the great shofar. And it says those Jews that were lost in Assyria and those Jews that were crushed in Egypt will return. So it says Assyria represents Asher, wealth, those Jews who got lost in riches. And what do we know about the word Egypt, Mitzrayim? It comes from narrowness, restrictions. So it says that Egypt represents poverty, the crushing of poverty. And so that the shofar will bring back those who got lost in riches, and those who got lost in poverty will be brought back. And so I just want to repeat that this time of year is the time for tefillah, tshuva, and tzedakah, and it is the time that the Chai Center has a Rosh Hashanah campaign every year, and there will be an email going out tomorrow about it's a time donate to the Chai Center generously, donate to your synagogue generously, donate and say that you wanted to go to Israel, and I have tons of families in Israel that I send money to. But use this time for generosity. It says the times between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it is extremely important that tshuva, return, can avert a decree, that tefillah, prayer, can return avert a decree, and that tzedakah can avert a decree. And mostly in life, in the past, everybody had their different things that they were working on. But we are all, the whole entire world, in a decree that we want to avert. So the more we can return in holiness and kindness and warmth to each other, and the more that we could pray, and the more that we could give. And giving tzedakah is not just what you don't need. It's giving from the essence. It's giving things, that's hard to give. So I just want to end with this story that I think it doesn't have Rosh Hashanah in it, but I think it's so much Rosh Hashanah. So I heard it from from a rabbi in Florida. The story takes place in Florida. So in the summers, for many, many years, the Lubavitch Youth Organization, the Lubavitch Movement, sends young men and women out to different countries, cities. I mean, I could really spend like 4 hours for bringing and telling you about so many stories that just even happened to my own children. But it's not for now. It'll be when we get together in a real life for bringing. But so during the summers, different groups go out to different places, and they go to like small towns that might not have a rabbi. They might do a small summer camp for kids, or they might go help a local rabbi who's there all alone, checking different people's mezuzahs, maybe doing a class, a 2-day class, and they travel from place to place, and they help out the local Jewish community in some way. So there were two young Hasidic men that were working in Florida for the summer, going to some of the small places, and they passed through Jacksonville, I think it's called Jacksonville, Florida, and they needed gas, and they pulled into a gas station to fill their car with gas. And the attendant comes out, and he looks at them, and he helps them, and he goes back into the back office. And then he comes back out again, and he said, "Would you please come with me into the office?" Well, Jacksonville, Florida, the middle of nowhere, it's the Bible Belt. They were a little anxious, but they did go. And they went in, and they walk into this back room, and there's an old man sitting there, and he looks at them, and he starts weeping and weeping and weeping, just inconsolably weeping and weeping. And the son says to them the following. He said, this is my father, and he showed me pictures. And he said, if anybody ever comes looking like you look, to bring them to him. And what was the story when this man came down? The story was the following. This man was from a big Hasidic dynasty in Europe. He had a family. He was an observant man. He suffered very much in the war, and his whole entire family was murdered. Every single person, not one person left. And he came to the United States, and he wanted to have nothing at all to do with being Jewish. In fact, he wanted to get as far away from Judaism as he could. He wanted to have absolutely nothing. And he went to Jacksonville, Florida, and he married a non-Jewish woman, and he had 3 sons, and he had this gas station, and he lived his whole life. His family had no idea that he was a Jew. Well, they wouldn't have known what it meant. And his wife died, and he got older and older and older, and old people, they don't sleep so much. And this happened the story happened a while ago, but it was over 40 years before that, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe would be on TV having Farbrengens. I mean, we used to all go to a central location to watch on a TV. It was the Farbrengens, because we didn't have a TV, so it was a big outing for the family. We all the families got together and we would watch the Farbrengens on TV. So the Rebbe was having this Farbrengen, and he was speaking in Yiddish. And this man's, his first language was Yiddish. He was raised with Yiddish. He was fluent in Yiddish. And he's listening to the Rebbe speak, and the Rebbe says that there are Jews that are all over the world, that are lost in the four corners of the world. They are like kidnapped children that were taken away from their homes and hidden in the far ranges of the world. We will come for you. We will find you. We will find you, we will come for you, and we will bring you home. And he said that after hearing the Rebbe say this man believed the Rebbe. He believed every word the Rebbe said. This was years before. And he took out pictures of Hasidim, and he showed them to his friends, to his sons. And he said, one day these people are going to come for me. When they come, bring them to me. And the son saw these Hasidim, and he brought them to his father. And the connection was that they kept connected. The rabbi they got in touch with, I think it was Rabbi Lipsker, and they kept connected, and they got him matzah for Passover, and when he died, he had a Jewish burial. And it just reminds me of what the shofar is representing. It says that the big shofar, the shofar gadol, will be blown in the times of Mashiach. And it will bring in all the exiles, everyone from all the four corners of the world, the people who are isolated, the people who've been left behind, the people who don't even know they're Jewish. And it will gather them all together, and it will bring them back home. And that is what the shofar is going to do. And this Rosh Hashanah, you know, we want to heal the world, and we want it to be better. So I really am asking everybody who is watching this, even though we are socially isolating and you might not feel comfortable knocking on your neighbor's door, maybe make a phone call, see if anybody needs anything. Bring Shabbos candles and leave them by a neighbor. Find out where the local shofar blowings are in your neighborhood and encourage people to go, encourage people to come there. And it really should be that this year that we really merit before Rosh Hashanah to hear that shofar gadol. I have one right here. If I could leap up on top of my bookcase, I would bring it down. It's not the shofar gadol, but it is a big shofar. And I just want to give everybody a blessing. Thank you so much for coming to the class. And really, may everybody be written and inscribed for health and livelihood and for really a blessed, blessed, sweet year. So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next week. And a good Rosh Hashanah. Happy New Year. Really happy and a healthy and a sweet New Year.